All right, so question is, are you familiar with Audible?
I have heard of it a few times, but if you don't mind giving a quick overview, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Uh, Audible is the audiobook app. It's owned by Amazon, but they basically run on like monthly membership model where you pay $15-ish, I believe, per month for a credit that you can translate into one book per month. And you can listen to that book. You can change the speed. They have a pretty good collection of the books that you can think of. Um, there's a review system attached to it. Um, but yeah, it's just kind of the de facto audiobook app in the US, I'd say. And my question is recently, I don't know if you use Spotify too, but recently Spotify launched their audiobooks collection that's bundled within their existing premium plan. Um, and right now, their limit is you can listen to 15 hours of audiobook per month with your current premium plan. And they also have a pretty big collection. And this happened pretty recently. That's one context. Another context is Audible has not been doing super well. It has had layoffs recently. It's warning layoffs in the near future. It's just not doing so well. And competition is cited as one of the reasons. So the question is, if you were the decision maker at Audible, what would you build,
Okay,
given all
got
this?
it. Got it. Cool. So let me play it back to you to make sure that I've captured everything. So we work for Audible, which is currently the number one audiobook company with an app within the US owned by Amazon. And basically the model is the users have to pay a monthly subscription fee of $15 to get the credit to listen to one book per month. There's been a recent change in the market, which is that Spotify, a music and podcast app, also launched their version of Audible within the app that's bundled with their premium plan, which gives its users 15 hours per month to listen to audiobook contents. So in response to that, we are now interested in learning what we can build at Audible to, I guess, not only to respond to Spotify's entry into the market, but also just to reverse the trend of overall bad performance. Is that understanding right?
Uh, yes.
Okay, awesome. So before I dive deeper into the questions, I do want to clarify a few things, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
So um, do you happen to know if there's any, I guess, synergies that Audible has with Amazon, or is it operating more as a standalone app? And the reason that I ask this is I feel like, Amazon, they're really great at building synergies, for example, the whole food acquisition, etc. And that's a direction that I like to explore if there's no current partnerships.
Yeah, that's fair. It's owned by Amazon. Um, so there's definitely opportunity to work with other parts of Amazon.
Okay, so for this case, I'm going to assume that there's no current bundle plans or whatnot with Amazon Prime, which will make it available for exploration in the actual case.
Yeah.
And secondly, so you mentioned that Audible has had layoffs and bad performance. So I wonder if we can quantify that a little bit. When we say bad performance, is that only indicated by layoffs? Do you happen to know any numbers in terms of, I don't know, maybe weekly active users, or more stats that can help us quantify the trend downward so that we understand how big of a lift we need to reverse the trend?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have exact numbers, but let's assume we see both decline in revenue and engagement.
Okay, got it. And that leads me well to the next question, which is how do we define success here? Are we, it's interesting because Audible is an app and I assume it is still growing to a certain degree, but it is also mature. So if it's a young app, I would say, focus on user growth, but are we at a point where we care more about the revenue?
What do you think?
It's a good question. Given that Meta just had this year of efficiency in 2023, I would argue that now is not the best time to throw everything you have at user growth and to focus on revenue and profitability. Let me know if you agree.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, cool, awesome. All right, so to once again summarize what we have gathered so far, Audible currently doesn't have any synergies with Amazon, so that's something we should explore. Performance has dropped in both revenue as well as engagement, assuming we measure by something probably as weekly active users. And the ultimate goal here is to increase revenue and or profitability. Does all of that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Now, Kevin, if I could just get 30 seconds to think through this one more time and come back to you with a framework, I would appreciate it.
Hmm.
Thanks. Okay, I'm ready. So I would like to take a slightly business school approach, and I'm doing this because, well, I have a business background, but I do think the approach makes a lot of sense here. So I'm going to first start with a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats that will help us understand where Audible is at and if there are any pain points slash opportunities that we can address. So after we go through that process and listing out the specific pain points slash opportunities of Audible, we will then prioritize them and perhaps pick the top three and turn them into features. And then lastly, we can talk about, implementation of the features, prioritization if you're interested, and then we can stop with a recap as well as risks and next steps. Does the framework make sense to you? Let me know if you feel like we should emphasize on certain areas.
No, go for it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so starting with the SWOT analysis, and this is always a fun one. It brings me back to my business school days. I have broken down the SWOT framework into the external bucket as well as the internal bucket. Starting with the external bucket, once again, we have opportunities and threats. I want to look at a few things. For the threats bucket, I would like to look at competitors. So Spotify will be one of them that we've already mentioned. I will also like to look at regulatory concerns under the threats bucket, because especially in the US, antitrust has been kind of hot in the politics lately. So we want to be wary of that. And in terms of opportunities, I would like to take a deeper look at our current users, at the consumers, to understand if they have changed and how we can do a better job at engaging current customers, as well as activating additional potential customers. In terms of internal, I would like to look at the internal synergies that we may have, as well as any weaknesses. So in terms of synergies, once again, because we're owned by Amazon, I believe that there can be many potential synergies that we should explore. An easy one here is perhaps the Prime membership, right? So Amazon is known for providing additional benefits that make the whole Prime membership experience and offering really strong and really competitive. So in my opinion, this is something that we should talk with the Amazon headquarters to get a better understanding on
Mhm.
whether there's any synergies or partnerships that we can do with them. Maybe as a Prime member, you automatically get $5 per month applied towards your membership, or maybe you get some credit, or maybe you get a free trial. We can figure it out, but I do think that the synergy will be very important here. Jumping over to the weaknesses, one of them that I would definitely like to take a look is the drop down in engagement, as you have previously mentioned. I would like to understand what is driving that change. Now, it could just be that customers are going to Spotify because it's cheaper to use Spotify. But if there are other reasons that are making the customers unsatisfied with their experiences on Audible, now would be a good time to figure that out. Cool. I want to take a pause here because I realize I've rambled a little bit to go over once again the potential threats, opportunities, strengths, and weaknesses. And I'm more than happy to take a deeper dive into each bucket that I've just mentioned and provide a few more examples, or I'm happy to deep dive into any specific items that I just mentioned. Want to take a pause here to see if you have any thoughts, Kevin.
Yeah, those are all, I think, valid factors to look into. Um, First of all, curious, you mentioned regulatory potential like regulatory pressure. Uh, what do you think, like, how do you think that plays into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think regulatory, like if we have to like measure everything by importance and uh, how urgent it is, I will argue that regulatory is something that's extremely important, but maybe not at the top of our list in terms of urgency. And the reason I say that is I have not heard of anything that related to antitrust regarding Audible or Amazon in particular. So I don't think that this is an immediate threat. But if we're doing this analysis and as product managers, we want to be comprehensive, I would like to consider this as well. And what's more important is we don't want whatever partnership we do with Amazon to become evidence in an antitrust study 2, 3 years from now, right? So I think it's important to consider, maybe not at the top of our list in terms of future development, but definitely good to have, especially, there's been a lot of scrutiny on that. One example is the Apple App Store and other companies in Europe and in the US.
Got it. Sounds good. Next thing I want to like dig a little deeper, it's you mentioned current and new customers. Can we go a little deeper on who do you think like Audible's customers are? Um, why are they paying for Audible? Like, what's the problem they're trying to solve here?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so to play back a little bit, so who are the Audible customers? Why are they using Audible? And I'm sorry, what was the last one?
Um, that's basically like what problems are they trying to solve,
Right, what is
right?
the wallet
For
add or
Audible,
what
but
is the pain
basically,
point? Yeah,
yeah.
got it, got it. Yeah, no, absolutely. So starting with the who question first. I think I don't want to be too specific here because I think Audible as the #1 app in the United States is already pretty big that, you can probably slice it in a lot of different ways. But I think one thing that I can say about the commonality of Audible is for people who have time to kill but cannot use their eyes. What do I mean by that? I commute to New York and I live in New Jersey. So every day that I go into the office, I spend 2 hours minimum on a bus or a train. And I don't really enjoy looking at my phone during that time, even though I could, right? And the same goes to commuters who drive or take other means of the communication. And honestly, this is where I listen to podcasts. I don't use Audible, I use Spotify, but I think the metaphor applies here. So I will argue that the most common usage group of customers of Audibles are people who are either commuting, who are doing chores, whatever they are doing on something, but they also want to listen to something that's maybe interesting or educational. And that's where the wallet add slash the pain point that Audible is addressing, right? Like I've listened to so many podcasts, but if I'm being honest, I haven't really read that much lately, right? So I would argue that that is the most common theme across Audible's customers or subscribers. And I'm happy to dive deeper into that, do a segmentation if you're interested. But for now, let me dive into why, which actually, fortunately, we've answered that question as well just now. People are busy. They want to consume media, but they may not have their hands or eyes free. So a better way to consume media is through your headphones when you're commuting or doing other chores. And lastly, the pain point or the wallet out of Audible, in my opinion, really is exactly that. You are able to consume media um, at a pace that you want, at a place that you want, So basically, giving you that extra layer of information, whether for pleasure or education, when you're perhaps otherwise too busy to get. Cool. So to summarize, people who are busy, people who want to consume media by listening to audiobooks, etc.
Okay, sounds good. So those are the people who use Audible. And um, just to like move us along a little faster, what to get closer to what you're trying to build, like
Sure.
the answer of this question, um, how do we approach that? Like, what are we not solving? What are we not solving well? How how would you start answering like what we're trying to build?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this is a real problem that we're trying to solve, I would ask for budget to do like an actual, customer analysis. I'll probably interview with a lot of users to really understand their pain points. But we're in a mock interview today and we don't have time to do that. So let me outline the few steps that I would take to solve that issue in the real world, and then we can maybe talk about a few assumptions that I will make on the spot. So the first thing that I would look at is to look at feedback. So how do we get feedback, right? It can be in-app feedback provided by the subscribers directly. It could also be reviews on Apple Store or on Google Store, especially bad reviews that are popping up recently in the last several months, let's say. So other than feedback that we're getting, I would also work with the data science team on our team to understand if there are any common themes with the subscribers that are dropping out. One cheesy example here is like if we can figure out if they're all subscribing to Spotify, then that would be an easy case for us to crack. But other examples could be, what geographies are they in? Are they, do they have any common characteristics? For example, do most of the droppers listen in the morning, etc. So those would all be traits that I can work with the data scientists to figure out. And last but certainly not least, is, like I said, do a user interview series, right? I would work, myself included, but I will probably work with a team of interviewers to actually talk to the users ourselves to really get firsthand experience of what do they not like about the Audible offering and experience that we currently offer. So to summarize, feedback, data science, and lastly, talking to the users myself. Those would be the approaches that I take. But now, in terms, if we have to make a decision based on an educated guess, to reverse the trend as soon as possible, I will focus on a specific subset of users, which are users that use Audible and they also use Amazon. Even better if they're Prime members. Why is that? To steal the slogan from Safe Farm, bundle car and home insurance and you save. And I feel like it would be a really good model proposition if we can implement something like that for Audible and Amazon Prime as well. Because right now, as an interviewee, I don't really know exactly what's wrong with the offering, but a pretty good educated guess could be that the price is just not competitive comparing to our competitors. So if that is the scene, and we don't want to just cut price because that will really impact Audible's revenue base. One thing that we could do that can still deliver value to our customers as well as maintain our profitability really is just do a bundle deal with Amazon Prime that I've given examples before. So that would be probably one of the first areas I explore. Other areas include maybe do a family plan if we don't have one already, or do target the more specific user segments such as students, student discounts, etc., etc.
Got it. So what you just said, it's all around pricing. So assuming like working backwards, that means you're saying the pain point right now, it's too expensive.
So based on the information provided at the start of the case, it sounds like Spotify launched a competitor service. And if I could take a look at my notes very quick, if you're already subscribed to Spotify, then it sounds like you are getting 15 hours per month for free. So that's why I'm drawing the connection with pricing here, because I feel like, once again, using myself as an example, if I'm already paying for Spotify, then I'm basically getting Audible book for free. So yeah, I do feel like price is probably playing a pretty big factor here. But if you would like me to consider other factors, happy to do that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think pricing is a good point, and there are definitely synergy with Amazon that we can explore. but I do want to talk about like other than pricing, the product offering itself. What would you do differently? And it's okay, like if you're not super familiar with Audible, feel free to ask me like details about the product that you want to know. Um, but I really want us to think about like how can we differentiate the product itself.
Yeah, definitely. So when I think about Audible as a product, I want to look at it from a few perspectives, right? The first is probably the selection of books, and then the second perspective is the delivery of the book, the experience of actually listening to it. So sounds like you do use Audible yourself. Can you share a little bit about those two perspectives?
Sure. The selection of books, let's assume Audible has, as of now, a slightly wider selection than Spotify and is more timely on new books. But Spotify also covers the basics. On the experience and delivery, it's pretty similar. You can adjust speed. I think that's probably the most frequently used thing for audiobooks that people want to control how fast it goes. Um, and for Audible, how it works is just you download the book audio into your phone, like locally,
Yeah.
and you can play it whenever with or without internet. Um, and it's usually pretty professionally narrated. I think Audible actually has our own uh, like talent in-house, like to do the narration. Um,
Okay,
but
so it sounds like for those two perspectives, Audible is competitive, if not better than Spotify. So maybe let me quickly explore a few other options as well. How do you feel like Audible does in terms of recommendation? Are they good at recommending a new book to you?
yeah, I think it's decent. The interface looks very similar to playlists or other like whatever other recommendation products
Okay,
where there are different cohorts that'll say because you read this book, we recommend these other books, or because you like this genre, we recommend this other books. That's how it goes. And you can also sample each book for it's something like 3 minutes just to listen to if you like the style before
okay.
you actually purchase.
Okay, got it. And one more question before I guess I kind of take a pause here, which is how many languages does Audible support? So you mentioned that maybe at least in the US it has a wider selection, but I'm not sure maybe in other geographies Spotify has better reach in terms of languages.
That's a good question. I don't have the answer. Let's assume they do similar on the
Okay,
front
got it.
of language coverage, mostly English content,
Okay,
but
got it.
some coverage of like most popular books in other languages.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we've explored four perspectives so far, and it sounds like from in your opinion, Audible is similar or comparable with Spotify in all four perspectives often. And if we're not considering price, if we don't think price is the main driving factor, I would like to make an argument for number three recommendation system, uh, based on the assumption that we're losing subscribers mainly to Spotify. And the reason that I want to make an argument for number three recommendation is that I have no doubt that Audible has a pretty good recommendation system, but maybe Spotify has data that we just cannot get. And what I mean by those are podcasts and music history of the Spotify users, right? So with those, I would feel like Spotify's recommendation engine can make a more relevant recommendation based on podcasts. For example, if you're listening to Obama's podcast and Obama just came out with a new book, chances are you want to listen to it, right? And that's just something that you cannot get at Audible. Um, does that, argument rationale make sense to you? And can we go with recommendation in terms of building new features?
Yeah, yeah, I actually love that point. I think that's very true. Spotify's definitely taking your other like listening activities as data for their recommendation. So yeah, how would you improve it?
Yeah, definitely. Let me take 20 seconds and get back to you.
All right, take your time.
Okay, I'm ready. So I want to look at the solution / improvements we built from 3 categories. First is user input, second is data selection, and lastly, algorithm improvement. And let me go over each of them one by one. So for user input, in a lot of ways, is another form of data collection. But here, I think we should strengthen the information we collect directly from the user. To give a few examples, it could be a list of preferences that user selects at sign up. And maybe Audible is already doing that, but maybe we should refresh the user's preference every 6 months or every year, or based on the user's actual listening. There's a common example where when you sign up for TikTok, you say, I like education, I like science, but actually you're looking at I don't know, gaming videos, right? So that would be one example where what the user says may not always be true, and we can verify. Another example is family profiles. So if we can connect users' family profiles as well as friends' profiles, maybe through Amazon, then there's another way that we can broaden the data sets available for the recommendation engine. The second category is data collection. So how that's different from user input is, we're not looking at users' data directly, but here I want to focus on synergies with Amazon. So there's a few services at Amazon that I feel like we really should partner with to broaden the data set available. One example would be Amazon Music. Another example would be Amazon Prime. I think Amazon Music is perhaps pretty straightforward, but the reason that we want to connect with Amazon Prime shopping history is that what you buy, especially if it's a book, I mean, Amazon did start as a bookseller online, can be important indication of what you might be interested in listening to Audible as well. And lastly, if that is still not enough, we can also explore third-party data collectors or vendors, maybe even partner with other music providers such as Pandora to get the similar sets of data like we got with like Spotify may have. So that is another avenue to explore as well. Last but not least, the algorithm and any potential improvements. So once again, I definitely don't think I'm the expert here, but if we're reevaluating the recommendation engine, I feel like we should definitely talk to the data science team to understand if there are any specific optimizations that we can make, right? For example, if you're a user based in China or Japan in Asia, maybe we will use a different recommendation engine than if you're a user in the US, just to give a very broad, straightforward example. So to summarize, I would build features that will help us collect data and improve how we recommend content to our users. And the categories are, user input, such as users' own preferences or their family history, additional data from Amazon's other services, such as Amazon Music and Amazon Prime, and lastly, generic algorithm improvements. Do you feel like, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, those make sense. Can we talk a little more about the first point? You're saying basically we want to collect more input from users directly. And you give an example of like when you sign up for TikTok, you can like check all the interests you have and stuff. Just want to brainstorm on that a little more. Like, what does
Sure.
that look like exactly? Is the TikTok form of like, here are the list of 50 topics, checks the ones you're interested in. You do that usually once when you sign up for the app, and that's it. Is that the flow you're thinking? What would the experience look like?
Yeah, definitely. So the unique experience that TikTok has is the average video is like 5 to 10 seconds on TikTok. But the average audiobook, even if you listen a lot, I would argue it's probably maybe 1 month or longer. So you're not getting as many data points as TikTok, right? So whereas at TikTok, you can say, last week you watched 1,000 gaming videos, but only 10 science videos. So we think you like we think you like the gaming video more. Whereas for Audible, the process is going to be much longer. It may take 2 years or even longer to actually get a list of data points. And let's not forget the user may have already churned before then. So I think we will definitely need to introduce other steps to kind of speed the process up a little bit. For example, if the user is not making progress on the book, using the science versus gaming example again, let's say the user signed up saying, oh, I like science books, and we recommend the user a science book. the user listened to it for 10 minutes the first day and then doesn't really log on to the platform for the next 2 weeks. And then the user finally logs on, and this may be the only chance we see the user before they cancel the subscription. So now may be a good opportunity to prompt and ask, hey, are you actually enjoying this book? If not, we can switch it up for you. And what would you be interested in, right? So that would be one example. And then there are certainly other metrics that we can measure, such as average speed, like how long are you listening per day? Maybe you do like science books, but you also like gaming books a little better. And when you're listening to gaming books, you're more engaged with us. You're logging in 3 times instead of once per week, right? Stuff like that. So I feel like those would be the Audible version of the TikTok recommendation experience.
Sounds good. Like them. Okay, we are basically at time. Anything else you want to add before we
Yeah,
wrap up?
yeah, absolutely. I always like to do a quick summary recap before we end, if that's all right with you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, awesome. So first of all, Kevin, thank you so much for a very interesting and engaging case today. Just to summarize a little bit, we worked on a case as product managers for Audible, where we're addressing the issue of additional competition and hoping to reverse revenue and profitability. The opportunities that we identified are two. One is the pricing strategy and synergies with Amazon's through their Prime membership offering. And the second offering is improvements in the recommendation engine through better data collection, as well as tweaking the algorithm to localize the recommendation strategy. And in terms of risks and next steps, regulatory was one of them that we talked about a little bit. So I want to be mindful of that. And then we also want to be mindful of overstepping other services that Amazon is offering. So we probably want to do a few guardrail metrics when we implement these recommendations to make sure that we're not accidentally taking users away, let's say from Amazon Music. In terms of next steps, looking over what we just said and think about implementation feasibility would be my immediate next step if this is a real problem that we're trying to solve.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Thank you. That wrapped up the interview portion. Great
Sweet.
job overall. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for doing it. Um, how do we want to do this? Do you maybe want to talk about how do you think you did? Any like feedback for yourself? Where do you think you did well and could be better?
Yeah, I did so well. I have no feedback for myself. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That was a joke. In case people can't tell. I do think I handled the case well. I like the fact that I gave a non-traditional framework for this because I really felt like because the way you framed the question it really sounded like a classic market entry case. So I went with the SWOT analysis in the beginning. I like that. Um, I feel like we may have spent a little too much time in the middle, which forced me to rush things a little bit at the end. I'm not sure if you felt it.
Mhm.
So that's something that I could have worked on. But on the flip side of that, I like that I was able to kind of engage with you when maybe we weren't going the direction that you want, and I was able to pivot. So I do want to pat myself on the shoulder for that. So yeah, overall, I think it was a fun experience.
Nice. Okay. I agree. I think you're right. I'll talk about what I wrote in my notes. So I think overall, high level notes. The first thing is I think you could be more centered around user and user problem. I think it's fine. It's good that you started with SWOT analysis. You didn't follow like whatever traditional framework it is. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing to me in a like this kind of interview is you keep talking about user and what problems they're facing. Um,
Can
and
I
your solution, your metric, everything should center around what are users trying to do? Like, what are they trying to get out of Audible? And to give an example, how you got to like the recommendation system, it's the thing you want to focus on. It was kind of centered around the fact that like Spotify has additional signals, so we should probably enhance ours, which is not wrong. But you didn't talk about so what, like why does the fact that Spotify has additional signal mean we have to improve our recommendation system is because users have a job to be done that is they want to find the next book to listen to and they want to
mm,
stick to it.
mm,
Right. So I feel like could do a better job at like centering around user, Um, yes, it's fine to spend some time on like those external factors, and I think you were very comprehensive in the beginning, but those are still like kind of the appetizers. Like the main course is still the who are the users? What do they want? Why are they not getting what they want? And
Interesting.
even the price part, I think the pricing is also part of that because essentially, like one thing, another like job to be done that user want is they want to listen to books at a reasonable price. And basically, like we either provide more value or we decrease our price. Like that's where the pricing point came up from. So everything should start from what user wants and how are we not solving it. You could have alternative opinion on that. That's just how I would like my answer to sound like. It's I keep thinking about user from the first second to the last second.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think this is where my like the business person of me took over in the case because it sounded so much like a business case. But I see your point that everything should be like the underlying content will probably be the same. I'll still talk about the pricing strategy, but I agree with you. Maybe the delivery would have been better if I started with the user and then talk about price point from that perspective. Um, the only pushback I'll give here is that at the beginning of the case, I clarified that we're focused on revenue and profitability. So from that perspective, it's almost like we're shifting away a little bit from the users, in my opinion, because we're no longer, you know,
I don't think that's what it means. You can measure, like, doesn't matter if you're measuring engagement, you're measuring revenue. Revenue comes from user subscription. Like, at the end of the day, like, we are going to make money if we solve users' problem. And that
sure.
problem includes affordability. So, yes, we are focusing, sure, like the two north is revenue here, but like how you get revenue, it's still starting from user problem. But I see what you mean. Like, I get your point. That's
Sure.
just more of a personal take, I think.
Yeah.
The next thing is I do think you could have allocated time a little better. Like in the first half took too long, and um, I kind of had to like pivot us into talking about okay, what are the actual pain points and solutions, and didn't have like as much time as we want there, which is super common. That happened in almost all my like actual interviews. I feel like that the part that I feel like I'm supposed to spend at least 60% of time on, I only have 30% of the time. Um, and usually not good because you want to like the skills, like the core skills you want to demonstrate are how you're able to solve problems. So if you only get 30% time of like how you're solving problems, that's not good. Um, but yeah, that's another point. And also like the last like high level point I would say is um I think the storytelling part and how like engaged you make me feel could be a little better.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
I think overall you did a good job. Like very easy to follow, very clear thoughts. Like completely get what you're saying. But especially when you're talking about user pain point, I do think it's important in this interviews to paint a picture of why it's painful. For example, like the recommendation, again, like that's the core problem we talk about. Like paint me a picture of how your user that made a New Year's resolution, if I'm going to read a book a month, and you come into Audible, you take 15 minutes to scroll, and you still couldn't find a book that like just hits you, and you decided, okay, I'm going to read the science book, and you started listening to it. 15 minutes past, you realize, what, like I'm not going to keep listening to it, but I guess I bought it. Like, paint me a picture of how painful it is that our recommendation system sucks. Because this is very real. Like this is such a real problem that like I face myself too. That if I, especially audiobook, actually, that the commitment is so high. Like each book is literally 15 hours of my life. Like that's a lot. So if I can't like make the right decision, that is very painful. I probably won't come back. So bring that like passion for how much you feel like this problem matters and how much you want to solve it into your tone and your body language and your like I do feel like that's maybe that's asking for a little like extra. But I think that's a lot of times what differentiates people in these interviews is if you convince me that this is a problem that like we need to solve today, otherwise we won't survive.
For education purposes, can you give an example, like pretending you were answering the question? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean that what I was saying, like I would start with like imagine you are a user who made a New Year resolution, you wanted to find a book, you come into the system and you see all these books that you've either already read or you've heard like mixed reviews about it. So you're like, I'm not sure. And you finally don't want to spend more time. So you pick a book that looks like right-ish and you start listening. The preview is only 3 minutes. It doesn't tell you what the content is. So you start listening and then realize either the pace is super slow or the content is just not what you expected. And you stop coming back to the app. And 15 days pass, you realize, ah, I made a New Year resolution. If I need to read a book a month and I'm only like 5% in. So you come back, keep listening, just can't keep up. And at that point, you feel super distraught. Audible didn't offer me any like kind of guidance on what I should do next. Because Audible doesn't do the thing that you're suggesting, where if I'm not making progress, offer to switch a book, which is a great idea, by the way. And the end result is I feel so bad that I'm neither making progress. So as a result, I'm wasting money. So next month I cancel.
Okay. Yeah.
So
No,
that's how I would.
I
I
absolutely
yeah,
love the last piece of feedback, by the way. I think that was really valuable. So thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you did absolutely cover the basics. Like you like made me. I think the most important thing in this communication is that you're being clear. That's the first point. Most people aren't even like I don't even know what you're saying. So at least you're very solid on that front. This is asking for, I think, even more. And I feel this in like a PM job that you need to be like an engaging, convincing speaker for
Yeah,
people to
definitely.
believe your idea.
Definitely.
Uh, so that's where it's coming from.
So if this was a real interview, would you give me a fail, a strong fail, a pass, or a strong
I
pass?
I don't know. I've not like interviewed in real life.
You can message me privately if you don't feel comfortable sharing. I just want to choose.
I would probably just like completely arbitrarily, I would give a pass, assuming there's the next round. Um, because I think you're like I like how you think. The ideas are good. You're a clear communicator. Um, but also answers.
But if this was the final round, you would probably ask for another round of interview.
Yeah, I would have to deliberate a little bit.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That was my high level feedback. There's some specific points that I took notes on. Just very quickly running over. First, in the beginning, you could have asked a little more information about the product. If you weren't familiar, which it sounds like you weren't super familiar, that's fine. You ask for more info later. But I think it's always good to have as much info about the product as possible, so you have more just basis to go off of. Um, Two, like the point on regulatory, not everyone brings it up. Audible actually does have somewhat of a monopoly problem. So that's good you brought it up. Next is when you talk about who use Audible, you mainly talk about commuters and people who are busy and don't want to use their eyes. That's a good time to bring up accessibility, and it's always good to bring up accessibility. And I actually believe Audible has a huge audience that use Audible for accessibility reasons. Not necessarily like blind completely or anything, but I imagine like older people who can't read as well, or like like there's a lot of like versions of accessibility that I do think is a big part of Audible's audience. And here I also kind of expected you to talk a little bit more about the overlap and differences in the customer base versus Spotify, because one way to go at it would have been basically, are you trying to fight for the same piece of pie against Spotify, or are you trying to hone in on the differentiated part? And like one point that I was thinking is um, Audible users or current Audible users are probably like have a stronger incentive to read like a bigger like readers compared to Spotify users who don't already like subscribe to audiobook service, because to them it's probably like audiobook, it's just another form of entertainment other than podcasts and music. But like if people already are paying for Audible, that means they actually really want to read. So to me, those are slightly different audiences, which can inform your roadmap, because if they're big readers, like there are a whole set of other features that we can think of. For example, they want to be more like community focused and like have uh more like kind of review system and like integration with Goodreads, display the books they read, make it more competitive. Like there's a lot more like avid reader features that you can think of. And versus Spotify, which is like a more casual listener. And the 15 hours a month limit also suggests that, because a lot of people on Audible, I would imagine, listen more than 15 hours a month. So that's kind of what I was expecting a little bit, but that wasn't clear. So not your fault you didn't mention it. Just thought I would bring up like an alternative point. Um, Next, on the when I asked about how would you like get to customer pain point, you walk me through the methodologies you would use, feedback, app store reviews, data science, data scientist, talking to users. Those are good. I don't think you should have spent as much time because they're pretty standard. Like you're not seeing anything like I've never heard of. So just walk me through it to show that, okay, you have the awareness to collaborate with other teams, but that's not where you're differentiating yourself in this interview. I really like the point on international market. You asked about like language coverage. I think that's really good that you're thinking about international market. Um, and yeah, one last point. Again, this is super stretch, not saying you have to do this at all. One thing that I feel in the job day to day now is the emphasis on AI, especially Gen AI. So I would imagine they would love to see some at least thinking around that. Um, And not, again, not saying you have to force a Gen AI solution onto everything, but I do think here, like there are possible solutions. For example, like another job to be done is people want to listen to narrators that you like, that they like. Like for me, it's a big factor whether the narrator is good or not. Like a big part I listen to, like all the Obama, like Michelle and Barack Obama books is because they read them themselves, and they're super good narrators. So it'd be cool if we could somehow do like Gen AI voiceover of your favorite like celebrities reading books, like that, just an example. But showing awareness that you're keeping up with like the Gen AI trend, I feel like it's not a bad thing to do. Again, not saying you have to pick that as your solution. All right, I think JJ has her hand up.
I do think the feedback are pretty valid. And I feel like even if you I feel like you kind of like went off trial a little bit, like you wanted to focus on revenue. But the product feature that you talk about are mainly about improving experience, which won't dramatically improve the revenue at all. If you think about Audible as a subscription model, the way that you improve revenue is basically two directions. One is acquisition. Basically, you go with the funnel to see what are the entry points, where can people sign up, and after sign up, maybe I already forgot. I've been like too long of a Audible member. I forgot whether they have a free trial, but or like freemium experience, but like basically freemium, and then they have like free trial and paid member. And then they start to retain, right? Renewal every month. So like down this funnel, is there any stage that you need to improve to further improve the conversion of the funnel, right? That's how you can get revenue. And also like after they churn, how can you call them back, right? This is like, first of all, like acquisition wise. And second, retention wise, I remember you talk about offering. I think this question will be way more difficult if you are a product manager at Spotify. Because this is a very monopoly market to enter. And like you said, there is a lot of synergies that you can play with within Amazon. But if you are a PM for Spotify, this question will be way more difficult. For example, in terms of offering, Amazon has been in this like book market for like decades, right? If you think about Amazon's relationship with all the authors, right? They have print copy, they have Kindle copy, they have Audible copy. Basically, all kinds of media of one book exists on Amazon.com, right? And if I am the PM for Amazon, I will definitely just go with the exclusive deal with the authors. Just stop signing deals with Spotify, right? That is like a very monopoly way to solve this problem. And like Kevin brought up a pretty good point of accessibility. I think like Amazon focused on accessibility way more than Spotify. But at the same time, Spotify focused more on user experience than Amazon. So you probably want to focus on like the total addressable market that you can address, like from Audible side and from Spotify side. And for Amazon, like one of the if you really talk about user experience wise, that you want to improve to like earn more money for Amazon. Spotify, I didn't exactly check like what is the business model if Spotify is gonna enter the audiobook market, but I would suppose that they're gonna like charge by book. This is my assumption. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin.
No, it's included. You missed the first part, I think. It's included in the existing premium bundle, which is so nice. But there's a limit of 15 hours per month.
So while we're taking a pause, I just want to point out that Kevin and JJ are actually taking two dramatically different approach to solving this case, and I think this is very interesting. Kevin focused on, and I took a you can argue I took another different approach. So JJ is focusing on the acquisition funnel, and I agree. I think from a revenue perspective that makes sense to me. Kevin focused on building features, so user-centric building features. I want to say my approach was closer to what JJ was saying, but I think I really came at it from a very business perspective. So just want to point out that same case, you can have very different solutions.
Yeah, and my assumption for Spotify, based on how they run the music business, is that they are trying to build an online forum. So, like for example, like users can follow the celebrities, and they can sell like event ticket and also their merchandise on Spotify, right? If Spotify is using the similar business model with audiobook, then that is going to be something like more disruptive to Amazon, because Amazon doesn't have this online forum. Like Goodread is basically the only platform that you can like share feedback, but you don't have that connection with the author. So if you really want to talk about user experience improvement, you can't really talk about recommendation algorithm. That is too small of a feature to drive revenue. So yeah, that's my thoughts. And also about the generative AI feedback, Amazon can definitely like destroy Spotify if both of them introduce generative AI, given Spotify is already run low on revenue, and also Amazon has the whole AWS to support whatever computation capability. Yeah, so you can like
JJ, have you seen Amazon's recommendation system? Like, have you shopped at Amazon? Like a common joke is you buy a toilet and they ask, do you want to buy another toilet? I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that like there's still some way to go.
Yeah, but it's just very hard to drive retention. This is very common to all the subscription model, unless you have like significant like improvements, like basically a business model change. Otherwise, it is very hard to drive retention. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks for the feedback.
Oh, and also I just want to, like when I was thinking about this question, the idea that I just been thinking about this for like years, that why does Amazon not do this is like an integration between Audible and Kindle, where you can like pick up where you left off on one platform to the other.
That would be really cool. I should have thought of that.
I don't like, I'm sure there's some technical challenges, but I just don't understand how these still haven't solved, because that would be like so sticky between both the services, and that would be like a very unique thing to Amazon.
I will say honestly, it often is a politics or business problem that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I'm sure they have like internal reasons, but externally it just feels like it doesn't make sense that they don't do it.
You should talk about it in your interview. We interview with with Amazon?